Welcome to Sartor TV. I'm Jennifer Crumpton. Today we're speaking with David S. Rose, CEO of Gust and author of Angel Investing, the Gust Guide to Making Money and Having Fun Investing in Startups. Welcome, David.
My pleasure.
Now, you started your first company at 10 years old, and you've raised tens of millions in capital. What has made you so successful in your career?
Well, I like to think it's still a work in progress. What has gotten me this far has been a combination of perseverance and energy and always moving forward. I think that I probably am a classic entrepreneur, which means somebody who goes through life seeing things that don't exist and trying to make them happen. So that's probably what it is that accomplishes whatever you want to do in life. As opposed to sitting back and taking the world as it is presented to you, you go out and take arms against a sea of troubles by opposing them, as Shakespeare said.
What role have mentors played in your life, and who have been some of your mentors?
Mentors are really critical, and mentorship is one of those words that is way overused for the simple reason that most people in their lives never have a mentor. And so therefore, because most people have never seen a real mentor or know what it is, the word gets debased over time. So now there are thousands of mentorship programs that you'll see and everything, and those are not real mentorship. A real mentor is somebody who gets to know you as a person, typically over a long period of time, because you've been working closely with them in some context, a professor or somebody at your workplace who takes an interest in you and is almost in loco parentis. And so a true mentorship is worth its weight, beyond its weight in gold. Most people, if they're lucky in life, will have one or maybe two mentors. So I'm a great champion of the true meaning of the word mentorship. In my particular case, I totally lucked out because I've got a father who is A, brilliant, B, an entrepreneur, C, very successful, D, a great parent. And so I have had a built-in mentor for my entire life in terms of my father, who currently is 85 years old, and last night he gave the commencement address at Sing Sing Prison to their graduating class of master's degree students. He's developing shopping centers in Ghana. He's publishing newspapers. He's an extraordinary guy. So that for me is a mentor and a role model. And I've been lucky at various points to have had mentors at various stages in my career in different businesses. I started out after school working for Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who was, of course, one of the greatest senators we've ever had, who for a number of years there was a mentor to me personally. And at various stages in my professional career, in whether it's government or real estate, which is my original career, or investing, I've had other people who have worked with me very closely and have been extraordinarily helpful. So I would suggest to anybody that if you keep your eye open for mentors, it doesn't happen quickly. You can't pick it up on a website and say, I want you to be my mentor. It doesn't work that way. It's somebody who you have been working with, who knows you, who takes an interest in you, and it's a two-way street, because I spend a lot of my time mentoring other people, and when you see it reciprocated, when you see somebody learning from what you're doing and the advice you're able to provide as a mentor, it's extraordinarily fulfilling.
What general advice do you give young people who are entering this crazy business world today?
The advice to a young person entering this world depends on a couple of different things. One of which, are you creating a new business, or are you looking for a career in another business? And I would differentiate those two, because the first are clearly the entrepreneurs. And entrepreneurs are very weird people. They are crazy people. It's like I see dead people. Entrepreneurs see things that other people don't see. And so almost every role in life that applies to a regular person does not apply to those 1%, 2%, 5% maybe people who are entrepreneurs. But one thing I think that everybody could benefit with, entrepreneurs and normal people, is just do it. I mean, most people go through life in reactive mode. Your school tells you what to do. The books tell you what to do. You're looking for a boss to tell you what to do. And the difference that entrepreneurs 24/7 live this just do it kind of life, but for everybody else as well, take advantage of what is available. It pains me to see people who go through life totally reacting, sitting back until some outside impetus tells them to go do something. But if you take the advantage, in any kind of context in which you are existing, any work, any educational environment, any city, there are all kinds of things to do, places to go, and that is how you enlarge your life and do extraordinary things. So just do it.
You personally went from entrepreneur to investor, and then sort of circled back to create Gust to fill a gap that you saw in early investing. Tell us a little bit about that journey and the lessons learned.
Well, I am by nature an entrepreneur. As you said, I started my first company when I was a young child. My first company was a multimedia organization which was doing marketing communication materials for my brother, who was a magician. He did kids' parties. And so we did his headshots and playbills and business cards and posters. The only problem was after a couple of years, he realized that the sum total of his income equaled the sum total of my income. And so there was a slight problem there, so I lost my client. But ultimately, I started other companies when I was in high school and college and graduate school and getting out of graduate school. So I'm actually a third generation entrepreneur, so it sort of comes by it naturally. I think it is partly genetic, partly environmental, partly role models and mentors. So my natural operating role is as an entrepreneur. And after creating my first business after graduate school, and then another business morphed into a larger business and hit the very beginnings of the dot-com boom and got very, very big, and then it crashed and burned, and then we started again, and it got even bigger and crashed and burned again. So after the second really big business really crashed and burned, my wife said, "Okay, that's it. You're grounded. No more starting companies." So I was removed from the field as an entrepreneur, and so all I could do was sit home and twiddle my thumbs and help get my kids in college and spend some time on my other passion project, which is actually the antique art of letterpress printing. So I have a whole other life in that kind of world. I've written books and teach and stuff on that. And then as I was sort of off the field, somebody who I had met during the dot-com boom, a guy named Andrew Weinrich, came to me with an idea for business. Now, Andrew is the person who invented social networking. Most people don't think that somebody actually, it's like you invented water. He actually invented and patented social networking, and with a company called 6 Degrees that I saw during the dot-com boom. And I just walked into their office one day and said, "I got to meet the CEO. This is a great idea." This is the mid-90s. And so we became friends. He ultimately sold the company at the height of the dot-com boom for $130 million or something. Unfortunately, it was all in stock. When the dot-com crash happened and the company ultimately got shut down, he was back on the street too as another entrepreneur. Ultimately, the patents that they had been issued on that for inventing social networking became the foundational patents for LinkedIn, among other things. But Andrew was an entrepreneur, was back on the street, and he had another idea for a business. And he came to me and said, "I got this idea for a business in the wireless space. I'd love to have you work with me on it." But I was still unbeached and was not allowed to be a co-founder. So I said, "Well, okay, all I can do is help and support you and provide some seed financing." And so that's how I became an official angel investor, and I became his first angel. And then from there, I joined the local angel investing group here in New York, which was the angel investor program from the New York New Media Association, sort of the trade association of the dot-com world. And that's where I met people like Esther Dyson and Alan Patrikoff and Josh Koppelman and Howard Morgan and folks like that. And so I did a number of investments there. And then since I still couldn't start a company, I could start a not-for-profit organization. So when the trade association ultimately went bankrupt during the dot-com crash and the aftermath therefrom, I spun out the angel group and created something called New York Angels. And that's how we founded one of the largest and most active angel groups in the country. And I got more serious about it, taught myself, learned from mentors and other people who had been investors ahead of me. And that's how I became a professional angel investor. So here I was now doing a lot of angel investments and running an angel organization. And I began to get involved with Singularity University, which was founded by Ray Kurzweil and Peter Diamandis on the West Coast in Silicon Valley. It's a postgraduate program in sort of exponential technological development in the future of society. And I actually am an associate founder of that and founded their finance and entrepreneurship program. So here I was looking and thinking about the future and looking at the angel world as an angel investor, having been an entrepreneur in the past who had raised all this money, organizing investors in an investment group. So you put all this together, it's like the perfect storm to realize that the future of the world, I believe, would be determined by these new startups, and these new startups would be funded as the cost of starting a company was dropping exponentially by angel investors, not by institutional investors and large venture funds and the like. So I got down on my hands and knees and pleaded, and finally got released from non-entrepreneur prison and was allowed by my spouse to start another company. So I started the company that eventually became Gust, while continuing at the same time to run an angel group and invest as an active angel investor and do Singularity U and everything else. So it's all sort of additive in life. So these days I'm the founder and CEO of Gust, the founder and now chairman emeritus of New York Angels, and I do a lot of teaching and lecturing and stuff on the side.
That's a fascinating story, and I'm wondering, how did you take some of those crash and burn failures that got you grounded? Not only did you find loopholes, but how did you use that to propel you forward and to learn?
And the answer is, it's searing, and so nobody likes to fail. Failure is not fun, but if you look at it as a growth experience and you chalk it up to learning and you don't let it kill you, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And frankly, until my first version of doing this happened in terms of the corporate failure, my life had been an unbroken success. I mean, everything was just absolutely perfect, and all of a sudden you wake up in the morning and I've got 125 people, and this in the middle of the .com crash, we got a real problem here. And so, whoop, the whole thing crashed and burned. And so, sort of, I cried myself to sleep, that night, and then said, okay, now time to put on your big boy pants and figure out what to do next, and try to learn your lesson. So in terms of the kind of business, the first business we had was based on one particular set of content that we were creating that was broadcasting it out through one particular set of networks to one particular set of devices. And so we said, okay, well, we need to be more generic than that. And so the next version of the company was actually a platform that allowed multiple sources of content and multiple devices and multiple networks and so on, and a much more robust system that, so you learn for the first time. And so this time we actually got it right, and nothing could go wrong unless like the entire internet crashed simultaneously on a global basis. And what are the odds of that happening, right? So when that happened, okay, now you realize the markets are actually bigger than any individual company, but having, this thing was taken out having done it once before. So now you learn from that. And somebody once said that the biggest part of life is just showing up and just doing it. And I've seen too many people who, when the first setback happens, they just let it knock them down and they stay down and they don't get up. But the people who survive, it doesn't matter how many times you get knocked down, as long as you get up one time more. Right? And so that's the essence of what you learn from failure. And the United States is amazing in that. Now, I've spent a lot of time recently in Europe and around the world looking at their startup economies. And one of the challenges that entrepreneurs have outside of the U.S. is that the culture is not designed to tolerate failure. Right. The U.S. we are a nation of immigrants, we are a nation of entrepreneurs, of self-made startup companies, a capitalist, free market-based society. And so therefore, we don't necessarily celebrate failure. Oh, isn't it wonderful that you went bankrupt? But we say, okay, that's part of the world. And there have been many, many people, many of the biggest successes out there have had failures and setbacks of one kind or another, and then they started again, and they were successful the second or the third or the fourth time. In much of Europe, for example, if you fail in anything, you are permanently tarnished. I mean, you are not allowed to start another company for another 7 years. You can't be a director of a public company. You can't raise money. You're personally liable. People, spit on you in the street and shun your children. I mean, the culture is not designed for failure, and there is such a societal, overload that it becomes so terrifying. The risk level becomes so large that you can't do it. And one of the things that's now happening as this entrepreneurial innovation culture is spread out from the U.S. to around the world is societies are realizing that, okay, even though we're a 1,000-year-old country or a society in here, that a lot of this innovation depends on taking risk. And when you take risk, as often as not, you're going to fail. But then, provided that you can get up from that and learn from your lessons, you start it again. And that's where innovation comes from.
You founded Angels New York. Why is it so important to have groups of investors?
An angel group is a wonderful place to get started for investors. Historically, business angel investors were a weird kind of thing. There was no industry for it, certainly, because companies did not grow as fast, did not start as fast. They were typically small, local businesses, a hardware store or whatever. And so to the extent that you had fast-growing companies, they were initially funded post-World War II by the early venture capital firms and the like. So what you're seeing seeing is with the decreasing cost in starting a company, which is going down by orders of magnitude. My first company took $20 million in venture capital to get to our internet product shipment. My second company only took $2 million. My first angel investment took $200,000 to get into internet product ship. So you're seeing as the cost drops and drops and drops, it becomes accessible to a wider number of people, many more people who can actually invest. An average person can't put in $20 million, $2 million, $200,000, but a well-heeled, successful person can invest $20,000 into a company. And so now it's becoming a mainstream thing. Historically, it wasn't. I happen to be not only a third-generation entrepreneur, but I think I may be the world's only third-generation business angel investor. As my late great-uncle, after whom I was named, the original David Rose, to whom I dedicated my book, Angel Investing, was the angel investor behind the portable kidney dialysis unit, vascular stapling for operations, hyperbaric operating chambers, desalination projects in the Middle East. This was an extraordinary guy who didn't get out of the 6th grade in school, but who, late in his life, his best friend was Vladimir Zworykin, who invented television. I once had lunch with my uncle, and it was Dave, me, and 4 Nobel laureates. I, Rabi, Rosalind Yala, Murray Gell-Mann, extraordinary people. So this was a guy who had an immeasurable curiosity, a total entrepreneur, and part of the entrepreneurial heritage there. But when he would be funding, he called himself at that point a biomedical catalyst. He would travel around the world, see new interesting developments, bring them back to the U.S., fund them as an angel, what we now call angel funding. The lab that invented the artificial heart, when Barney Wolf, the first patient, he was that lab. He had an artificial heart in his hand. He was showing me, and so with that back then, people thought he was crazy. Even people in the family, and I come from a rather liberal and intellectual family, they would look at, oh, that's Dave. That's Dave's playthings. There's no percentage in that, no interest in there. And I was the only person in the family who thought this was actually a very interesting kind of thing. Even today, the rest of my family thinks that what I'm doing is a little weird. So if you are interested in being an angel investor, there's typically not a lot of support. How do you know what to do? That's one of the reasons I wrote the book, Angel Investing, The Gus Guide to Making Money and Having Fun Investing in Startups. It steps you through, for the first time ever, it steps you through the whole process of this is what angel investing is, here's how you do it, here's where you find companies, here's how you structure deals, here's how you work with your entrepreneurs to add value, and so on and so forth. But so, before the book, or absent the book, the question is, how does a regular, ordinary person become an entrepreneur, become an angel investor? And, well, there aren't necessarily any classes in it. And so joining an angel investment group like New York Angels means that here you have people who are like-minded, people who have done it before, people who are learning with you, people you can learn from, mentors in terms of angel investing. And so joining a local angel group is a wonderful first step for somebody who is looking to be a potential angel investor, because the group, it sticks up its hand and says, hey, we're a group of angel investors. If you're an entrepreneur and you want money, come let us know about it. So they develop deal flow in inbound opportunities that an individual person would never have. They then provide other people who have led deals before who can help you understand, does this make sense? How does this look relative to other opportunities we've seen? What are the likely pitfalls here? When you structure a deal, how do you structure it? How much should we put in? And you get to do things in a group and learn by doing with like training wheels on. And so it's a marvelous place to start. And then over time, it's a great place to continue because you see a constant stream of deal flow, which is being vetted by your peers in this group. So that's why we join angel groups.
Now, your career is very unique because you've been on both sides of the fence as an entrepreneur and an investor. And Gust is unique in the way that it connects entrepreneurs with investors around the world. How, as CEO of Gust, do you lead? What's your leadership style? How do you encourage innovation?
Well, the question in terms of being a founder and being a CEO and leading a company is a real challenge. And so ultimately, as companies, when you're starting a company as an entrepreneur, remember, so you have a founder who starts a company, you have a CEO who manages a company. An entrepreneur is a combination of a founder and a CEO. You have to do both. If you're an entrepreneur, you don't just say, hey, here's an idea, somebody else go run it, nor do you take somebody else's idea and just and execute it, right? So an entrepreneur is both of of those things coming together. And so in the first day, you are everything. You are the chief cook and bottle washer, you are the sales thing, you're a fundraiser, you're the product developer, you're the designer, and everything else, right? As a company gets larger and larger and larger, you basically try and hire people better than you in every area. You want to hire a better CFO than you can do finance, a better coder if you're a techie, a better product designer and a salesperson than you are. And so ultimately you hire really, really great people to take on those pieces. And then when you get to a certain scale, it turns out that they are doing all of the operational things that make the business work, developing new products and handling market analysis and finance and so on and so forth. So what then is the role of the entrepreneur or the CEO at that point? And so it boils down to what is leadership. And I think that in terms of the core things that you're doing, one, you're establishing the values. What are the values of the enterprise? They come from a person. An organization doesn't have any values. In corporations, it's an abstract thing. It exists on paper or in a database. But it comes down to the founder, the leaders, what is the culture and values of the organization. And in our particular case, since I wear my values on my sleeve, I write about them in the book as to what entrepreneurs, investors look for in entrepreneurs. They come down to things like integrity and transparency and doing the right thing. And so that is so imbued in our company. And that's the one firing offense. You can make mistakes. People make mistakes all the time. And in an entrepreneurial startup world, if you are leading a company, you have to give people the opportunity to create things, do things that you wouldn't necessarily do, to take risks, to explore, because you single-handedly can't do everything. Unless you're saying 100% of this company's innovation is in my head, which is a recipe for failure because things are moving so fast it doesn't work, then you have to let individual people, you hire people correctly, spend a lot of time getting the right people in, giving them their head, letting them go ahead and make mistakes if necessary, and then learn from your mistakes and then do something else. So in our company, making a mistake is not a firing thing, right? Even taking a risk is not a firing thing. Any integrity issue, instant, on the spot, that's terminable, because the core and guts of this and the values that we espouse, that I espouse personally, become the values of the company. And so the goal and the role ultimately of the CEO as the company matures is maintaining the values, as the value person in chief, holding the vision for the company. A man's reach must exceed his grasp. So you may be doing this now, but what you're doing now is dependent on where you're going in the future, and that future vision has to come from the CEO. So those are the primary things: the vision, the values, and then ultimately being, in many cases, the public face of the company, the outside salesperson, not selling individual deals, but selling the company and representing the company to the world. And so you hire great people, establish the values, be keeper of the long-term vision, and be the public face of the company.
You gave a famous TED Talk on the 10 things that you must know about yourself when pitching to venture capitalists. What are 2 or 3 of the most important aspects of that talk?
It was actually phrased as the top 10 things that investors look for in an entrepreneur. Because when you're an investor and you're betting on an entrepreneur, you're not betting on a company. This is not like buying stock in the stock market where you can look at a company's financials and see what they're doing, who their customers are. Typically, as an early stage investor, we are looking at an entrepreneur who has an idea for a company. And they may have a product, they may have beta, a prototype, a couple of customers there, but we're not investing in a finished thing. We're investing in the promise of something. And that promise lives in the entrepreneur. So and it comes down to investing in you as the entrepreneur. We call that betting the jockey, not the horse, because ultimately every company pivots, things change, markets affect things. So the question is, we're coming down to relying on you. And we have these in the video, and I also noted in the book, there are these 10 characteristics that are the top 10 that most investors, certainly me, look for. And the number one thing, if you ask people who haven't seen the video or read the book, what is the number one thing that investors look for in a company? They will give you all kinds of answers, from commitment to coding skill to networks to whatever. And they are, the number of people who actually get the first one out of the box is unfortunately tiny, because the number one thing, the number one characteristic that investors look for in a company is the entrepreneur, and the number one thing you look for in an entrepreneur is integrity. And this is not a do-good, feel-good thing. I'm a goody two-shoes. You should just be a good person. No, this is a business decision. The reason being that when we're investing in an entrepreneur, we know that we are investing in a whole lot of known unknowns, right? We don't know what the market's going to happen. We don't know if the product's going to work. We don't know if there's something what the competition is doing. We don't know about anything. All we know is we don't know those. So the one and only thing we can control for is, do we trust the entrepreneur? Because this person is going to be making decisions as an entrepreneur every single hour, every single day. The entire company is a series of decisions as you go forward. You're picking paths to do. And if I don't trust you totally, absolutely, I will never know if you're making that decision based on what's good for you or what's good for the company, and I'm an investor in the company. And so therefore integrity and a belief that whatever you're going to make wrong decisions, you're going to make mistakes, we may disagree on stuff over there, that's all fine. But if I can't trust you, it calls into question every other decision you will ever make, and I can't live with that. So the number one characteristic we look for is integrity. The number two characteristic is, what is driving you? What's the passion? There has to be passion there, because entrepreneurs are these crazy people. Entrepreneurs do not follow normal rules. Entrepreneurs are effectively sacrificing their entire life. There is no such thing as work-life balance for an entrepreneur. There is work-life balance for people who work in startups, but not for the entrepreneur. The entrepreneur, unfortunately, is sacrificing their life because the only thing they know how to do is start a company. It is this. It's like Gene Kelly, the character in Singing in the Rain. He's the hoofer coming in from Ohio to New York. Gotta dance, gotta dance. Knocks on the first door of the agent, and they say that, and they slam it in his face, and he goes to the next door. Gotta dance, gotta. They slam in his face. He goes to the next door. Gotta dance, gotta. An entrepreneur has got to create a company, right? So therefore, what drives you there is the passion. You have to. I have never yet seen a successful entrepreneur who wasn't passionate about the company, the business they were creating. Not necessarily the technology, not necessarily the marketplace, but the act of creation of the company. And that passion, it can be demonstrative passion like me. I know how I come across. I'm loud. I speak fast. I use my hands. It can be a James Earl Jones type passion, controlled, sitting there, but you sense passion. Luke, I am your father, in every word that comes out of you, right? So we need to see that kind of passion. And then the third thing you asked for three would be experience. And that actually comes into there sort of three subsets of experience. One of them is experience in starting up a company. If I'm going to the barber, I would like that you had learned to shave on somebody else's whiskers before your first time with a razor is on my face, right? So therefore, before you spend money on your company, it'd be very nice if you learned how to be an entrepreneur, learn how to do a startup on somebody else's money first. So experience in starting a company is really, really useful. And that's why investors love to invest in serial entrepreneurs. Number two is experience in the space you're in. We call it domain expertise. Do you know, if you're in the shoe business, do you know anything about shoes? Know anything about retail? Know anything about fashion? You certainly wouldn't go to me to start a shoe company. That would not be a good idea. So domain expertise. And then the third kind of experience is experience in the functional skills of being a early stage startup CEO. Somebody, you have to have the skills of product development, like technology, sales, finance, all those kinds of things. And if you don't have those skills, we look for as many of those as we can. And if you don't have them, then you have a team around you that you built, and that's the leadership skill that comes into play. So those would be the top things that we look for.
So you've also been dubbed the pitch coach. What's the number one consideration or strategy when it comes to pitching a VC?
The vast majority of people who give presentations approach it the wrong way. They think that what they are doing is giving a presentation. So historically, for certainly the last couple of decades, when you are pitching for money, you're trying to raise money, you go to an investor, you show them a slide presentation. Originally it was slides, then it was overhead projected, transparencies, now it's PowerPoint or Prezi or a computer-based presentation. And so people think, I'm giving a presentation. Here's the presentation. And they look at they put up the presentation, they look at it, and they say, on this slide I'm telling you about blah, blah. Blah, blah. And they're effectively narrating the slideshow. And that's the wrong approach. The correct approach is to understand that the purpose of the presentation, per se, is to add emotional resonance to what you are saying. Remember, this all comes back to what an investor on the other side is looking for. I'm looking at you as the entrepreneur. I'm looking through those 10 characteristics. I'm trying to bet on you. And so, therefore, I'm going to spend my entire time during your pitch looking at you, and you want to, therefore, in return, have got to be looking at me. I want you to make eye contact. I want you to talk to me. I want to know that all the stuff you're telling me is stuff that you know, not that you're narrating some slides on a screen. So the goal of a presentation is to support, it's speaker support material, is to support you. So I should be able, or somebody should be able to come in behind you, turn off the slides, and you should be able to give the exact same presentation, and it should work exactly as well, because I'm getting it from you. You are the source of information. You are the source of all the explication around it, of telling the stories, of making it real to me. And all the slides do is add emotional resonance to what you're saying. And once you get that in place, then you think about the slides in a different way, you think about your relation to your audience in a very different way, and it becomes a much, much stronger presentation.
Well, let's delve a little bit deeper into your book, Angel Investing. What would you say is sort of the central theme or thesis of the book? Who did you write it for? And what's the one big idea that you really want the readers to take away?
The book, Angel Investing, The Gus Guide to Making Money and Having Fun Investing in Startups, was written for the potential angel investor, somebody who was interested in investing money into startups. Now, typically, this is a person of some means. I call angel investors typically rich-ish people. I mean, if you're really a super rich person, if you're a billionaire, you just don't have the time, frankly, to invest $10,000, $20,000 into a startup company. You have people to manage your money for you. You're concerned with the great affairs of state. You don't get down and putting a little bit of money into little companies. So angel investors tend to be people who have investable capital, and typically in the United States you need to be what's called an accredited investor with assets of over $1 million, not including the value of your house, or income of over $200,000 a year. That's the baseline level. Over that, it's fair game. In reality, most angels tend to have a little bit more than that, so they're investing some tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars over time into startup companies. And so the book was written as the instruction book for somebody like that who says, okay, I've heard about this angel investing stuff. I see Uber and Google and Twitter and stuff out there growing very rapidly, making a lot of money. How can I get involved here? And so until now, there has been no instruction book at all. There were virtually no classes. There were no instruction books. How the heck would you know what to do? Well, you could join an angel group, which is a great way to do it. But other than that, it was by trial and error. And so invariably, angels make all these mistakes, and they'll invest the first deal they see, and they'll write big checks, and they won't think about deal structure and all this kind of stuff. So this book was designed as the step-by-step guide to saying, okay, you want to do it? Here's how you do it right. That's who it was designed for. As to the central thesis of the book, there are actually two different approaches to angel investing, two large sort of meta approaches. One of them is what I call the Silicon Valley approach. And this typically is by the people you have heard of as angel investors or super angels and all these high-flying companies in California. And they are what's called unicorn hunters. They are on the hunt for a unicorn is a billion-dollar company. Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and Zynga and Uber, and these are all unicorns. And they're called unicorns because they are very, very, very rare. And so the unicorn approach to angel investing says, I just have to be in that deal. And if I'm in that deal, in that one unicorn deal, doesn't matter, nothing matters. Terms don't matter, valuation doesn't matter, anything matters. I mean, take, for example, Uber, the taxi cab sharing company. If you had invested as an angel investor in Uber at a $1 million valuation originally, you would have done fine. At a $10 million valuation, you would have done fine. At a $100 million valuation, you would have done fine. At a billion valuation, you would have done fine. At a $10 billion valuation, you would still today have made 5 times your money, right? So therefore, if you happen to hit Uber, all bets are off. You can you just throw money in there and say, hey, take this money and give me something at the end, and you'll do just fine. However, in the real world, most people do not have access to Uber. Most people who are looking to be angel investors, even if you're in California, and certainly if you're not tied into that kind of community, are unlikely to have that opportunity to hit a unicorn. And so, therefore, the problem with unicorn hunting as a approach to angel investing is if you don't hit a unicorn, you're dead. I mean, everything you get zero. It's either 100% or zero. It's like betting on double zero in roulette. I mean, that's your one shot. The essence of the book is the other approach to angel investing, which I call the everybody else approach. And so this says it's not a unicorn hunt. You don't need to. As a matter of fact, I've invested in 110 companies, and I have not hit one single unicorn. Okay. On the other hand, I've been investing in all these companies for over 15, 20 years at this point, and my IRR, my annual rate of return on this, is over 30%. Okay, 30%. Now it's not hitting a 3,000x return on an Uber, but a 30% IRR compared to if you put your money in the bank, you get 1%. In stock market, maybe 5%. A hedge fund, 10%. Getting a 30% return, that's really pretty amazing. And so there it comes down to effectively Moneyball. The idea of doing it with discipline and doing it rationally. And so the essence of this book, the lesson from this book is if you do angel investing as a rational person, follow the lessons in the book. There's no secret. What there is discipline, and there is an understanding of how the markets work. And because it is a hits business, and you are going to have, if not an Uber, you're going to have one company that's wildly successful and many that fail completely. The actual typical outcomes for professional angel investing are that out of 10 companies, 5 of them are going to fail completely. Not just if you invest money in the stock market, you expect hopefully your company's going to go up. It may go down a little bit. You don't expect it to go bankrupt the next morning, right? That would be awful. Well, in case of angel investing, that's what happens. 5 out of 10 companies, which you invest, go bankrupt, and so therefore you got 5 left. And of those 5, over 6 years, because it's a long holding period, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years you're holding these companies, 2 of them will return the money you put in. Well, that's not great. You're not going to lose it, but at least return the money you put in. That means you get 3 winners. And of those 3 winners, typically 2 of them will be nice, solid successes. They'll return double or triple your money. But it takes a long time. It takes 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. And it turns out that because money has value over time, called the time value money you learn in business school, that those 2 winners at the 2 to 3x and the 2 that return even money, at the end of, say, 6 years, you add all that up, you're right back to where you started from, with the cash you put in accounted for the time value of money. But you haven't made a profit yet. And so, therefore, the profit on your whole portfolio comes from that one last company. That one last company doesn't have to be a unicorn, but it does have to be something like a 30x. In other words, that has to be worth about 30 times the cash, the valuation when you put your cash in. And so we look for companies that are called gazelles. A gazelle is a company that's a high-growth company, is doing very, very well, but there are hundreds of thousands of these gazelles that aren't unicorns. They're fast-moving, high-growth companies, and the goal is to find a company that early on that is likely to be a success, a very solid success, grow really big, and do so without taking a lot of money, and invest at a valuation up front when you put your money in that recognizes that it's an early stage, not profitable startup company. So if you invest, for example, in a company at $1 million valuation, where you're putting in your money, and say the company comes to you, they say we're worth $900,000, you put in $100,000 in total as an angel investor. After your investment has gone in, the company's worth $1 million, and you put in $100,000. Well, if 6 years later that $1 million company sells to another company for $30 million, okay, that's a 30 times return, and your $100,000 at that point would be worth a lot of money, $3 million, right? So therefore, the question is, how do you get those kinds of companies, and how do you have to find the companies, and then you have to negotiate appropriately on those valuations. And the essence of this book is saying, okay, angel investing, when done appropriately and with discipline, is not crazy, it's not crap shooting, it's not hunting for unicorns, it's not throwing darts at a wall, it's actually being a rational investor. And if you do it right, even without getting those unicorns, you can still, over time, get a 20, 25, 30% return on your money.
Tell us a little bit more about your portfolio theory.
The portfolio theory of angel investing says that you are unlikely to hit a unicorn on your first try at investing. So there are people who have invested in only one deal in the world, and that deal was Twitter, which is great, congratulations. But in the real world, that is not going to happen to you. So therefore, it turns out that the distribution of returns, as we've discussed, is most companies fail, and 1 out of 10 is going to be a home run success, order of magnitude. And so therefore, the goal is to have enough companies, to make enough bets on the table that you have a likelihood of getting that 1 in 10. So if 5 out of 10 fail, and you flip a coin, the odds are you only invest in one company, the odds are it's going to fail, right? So therefore, I would suggest that it makes sense, if you were to be doing this seriously over time, that an angel invest in 20 companies, 20 to 30. Okay. I would say 30 is probably the ideal number. I've invested in 110, but I'm crazy, and that's a long-term, that's an out of the spectrum thing, right? But even 10 companies would be a pure minimum. Because investing in less than 10 companies, the odds of you're getting that 1 out of 10 that's going to be the big moneymaker return for the whole portfolio is actually very small. And so it turns out over time, if you do the simulations, that a 20 to 30 company portfolio is about what it takes to give you a pretty good set of odds that you're likely to hit at least one company that's going to have enough high returns to make up for all the ones that don't succeed.
How can you actually best identify the high potential opportunities? What are some tips?
Well, every new angel that I've ever met says, I'm interested in angel investing, but I really only want to invest in the hot companies. Well, that's right. Yeah, you and me both, right? I would love to invest in only the hot companies. And I will tell you that there is nobody who invests only in the best companies. I mean, even the world's greatest pickers of early stage companies, people like Josh Kaufman of First Round Capital, or Fred Wilson of Union Square Ventures, or Mark Andreessen, great guys who have an insane track record of identifying early stage opportunities that later become these unicorns. Even these guys, more often than not, miss. Even these guys, the majority of their companies are not these mega successes. So therefore, if they can't do it, and I certainly can't do it, the odds are you probably can't do it. So the question is, there's no surefire answer. And because a lot of this, when you're dealing with early stage companies, the potential outcomes are from nothing to everything. Whereas if you're investing in a company on the New York Stock Exchange, a blue chip company, you know what they're doing, you know what their revenues are, and the odds of what their performance next year can be a little worse or a little better or the same thing. So the odds the potential outcomes are like here. With a startup, where it's like this from zero to nothing, you can't play that hand. But what you can do is you can tilt the odds in your favor. The most important thing is looking for the entrepreneur. We've discussed this before. I spent a lot of time in the book saying, you're betting the jockey, not the horse. You're betting on the entrepreneur. So you look at these characteristics and the qualities of the entrepreneur that will outlast the business. Because if the business pivots, if it completely gets changed, you're betting on this person to pull it out. That's the number one thing. Then beyond that, there are a bunch of other things, right? So around that entrepreneur, who's the team that she has assembled or he's assembled? Whether it's the hustler and hacker pair, or the hustler hacker in suit to do the sales, or there are a lot of different approaches and acronyms for how you want to look at a team. But you look at the team, the founding team. Really, really important is the market. Is the market that this company addressing a big and it's a big market today? Does it exist? And are people spending real money into this market? Because if nobody is spending any money in this market buying anything that they're selling now, it's a real crapshoot. I mean, you're betting that they're going to somehow create something out of scratch. So you want something where there's already money changing hands. But if changing hands on a trajectory that looks like this, it's a growth market. So, for example, if somebody comes to me with a new buggy whip company, well, that means you may have the world's best buggy whip, but the number of horses and carriages out there right now is really small. So that would not be a great big business. So you look for a market that is large and growing, because a growing market, even if the company you're investing in is not the world's most successful company in that market, if the market is growing up, the company itself might be acquired, might be part of a roll-up, might do okay, and so you look for that. You look for business models that are scalable. A business model says, how does the company make money? And if you are in the widget business, you could be a widget manufacturer, you could be a widget distributor, you could be a widget designer, a widget painter, you could eat widgets, you could be a widget reviewer, you could do all kinds of things, right? So the question is, what is the company actually doing, and how does it make money? Does it sell widgets wholesale, sell widgets retail? Does it provide widgets for free to people who read advertisements from their sponsors? There are all kinds of things. So when we look at business models, we want to know, does this business model make sense, first of all? And second of all, is it scalable? Because scalable business models are really important. Scalable says, is this a business model that you can prove out with a small sample, with a little bit of money, with my angel money up front? And then if it works, is it something that by just throwing more money into it, we can go whoop and make it really big? That's why businesses that are dependent on people tend to be really challenging for angel investors to invest. A consulting service. You may be the world's greatest consultant in widgets, but the problem is, that's you. And so once we've exhausted your capacity to take on new consulting clients, it's very hard to get clone you, 2, 3, or 4 you to do the same thing. Whereas if you have a website, Twitter, where people are individually typing in things, going into this magic computer in the sky, and then it sends them out, that's actually very easy to scale, and you can get hundreds, millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people using the Twitter account. So we look for businesses that are scalable in a large and growing market with an entrepreneur, and that where, in terms of making the deal, the valuation for the company in which we're investing up front is such that if the company does scale and succeed, when the company ultimately has an exit, it either is sold and purchased by a larger company or it goes public, we will be able to get an economic return on that company that is worth the candle for us putting it in.
Terms and exits and all of these technical things. You talk in the book about how important it is, the term setup, and how often people sort of just skim by this. Talk a little bit about the tips you give in the book about the terms.
Well, when one invests, when an investor puts money into a company, they don't just say, here's a suitcase of cash, goodbye, have fun with it. It comes with a set of terms that define the relationship between the investor and the company, as it should. You're dealing with real money here, because the money that I am putting into your company is fungible money. I could use this company to go buy a sports car, take a vacation, have a very nice dinner over here, but instead, I'm investing it in you, the idea being that ultimately it will grow into more money, and I will be able to get more boats and more dinners over here. And so therefore I need to know that it's going in, how it's going to be used, how I get it back when good things happen. And part of the challenge is because the terms that govern this relationship between the investor and the entrepreneur tend to be substantive and many, many pages of this stuff. If you just sign things without reading them, you won't know what happens. And so it's important to understand for both the entrepreneur and the investor exactly what is governing the relationship, because I have seen all too many times nasty surprises on both sides where a company sells for a lot of money. Let's say I invested in a company at $1 million valuation, and then it sells for $100 million valuation. It's perfectly possible that if the company sells for $100 million valuation, I may get $1 million or $2 back. Well, I said, wait a minute, it's $100 million. What happened? What happened to my money? By the same token, if a company can have a sale for $50 million, and the entrepreneur can find that they get zero money back because it all goes to the investors, the entrepreneur is sitting there saying, well, what happened, right? And so all this is defined by the terms, and so the book goes into a lot of time discussing the various terms. We have sample term sheets of different types of structures, convertible loans to a company, which might be done by a friends and family round before serious investors come in, to a Series seed round, which is what the kind of terms that angel investors, professionals usually put in to help. And I actually annotate an entire term sheet in the book so both sides understand exactly what these terms mean, why you put it in there, why both sides want to do it, what the effect will be when you come to the end of the day. So it's very important to understand how you're being treated, what your money is being used for, and then what happens in both the good side and the bad. Because there's a saying that success has a million fathers and failure is an orphan. But if you have a wonderful outcome and your company sells for $1 billion, becomes a unicorn, that's great. There'll probably be enough cash to go around, so we'll all make money. The problem typically comes when if the company, if a company fails totally, splat, it's out of business, everybody loses everything, and we go home. The problem typically comes when between those two cases, where it's a modest success or a partial not so success, and it's picked up off the street there. Then when there's not enough money to go around to pay everybody back, what happens? Who gets that money, and why? That's what term sheets are written for, and that's why it's important to understand them.
Once you close the deal, what are some ways investors can continue adding value?
One of the things about angel investors as opposed to people who buy stock in the stock market, when you buy General Motors stock or Google stock, you own the stock and that's it. You don't talk to Sergey Brin and Larry Page. They don't call you up for advice. There is very little you can do aside from clicking on ads in Google search engine to affect the company. But that's quite different in the early stages. And so angel investors, professional angel investors, typically want to be and are wanted to be by the entrepreneur what's called smart money. And those are investors who can really add value to a company. And so the question is, what can you do, having put your penny into the pot and bet on this company? You want to do everything you can to help it. And different people can provide different things to a company. One, if you happen to be a wise, experienced person, you can give advice and guidance and serve as a mentor to your entrepreneur. Not everybody can do that, but when you do it, it happens. One thing everybody should do is constantly be on the lookout for potential partners, investors, customers that you can introduce the company to. Typically, startup companies are relatively small, and so any early clients, particularly big name ones who write big checks, can be really helpful. When a company is thinking about an exit, okay, you can think, if you're plugged into the community or the industry, and you know companies that you might be able to introduce them to who might want to acquire them, really, really important in terms of getting other people to invest. If you think this is a great deal, and the company is now doing another fundraising round, and you're going to put money in, then the fact that you can identify people you know who are as co-investors and help convince them to put money in, that's an enormous value to the company. part of the problem there is that if you're not putting your own money in, but you want to get somebody else to put their money in, then that's a big negative, right? Because somebody would say, well, why aren't you investing? But so things like this, where you're advising the company, you're introducing them to clients and customers, you're tweeting out, you're retweeting, their posts and reblogging their posts about their success stories, mentioning them when you give speeches or when you do TV interviews. These are all good things that an angel investor can do for the company.
And what are some non-monetary reasons to become an angel?
Well, the title of my book is Angel Investing, the Gust Guide to Making Money and Having Fun investing in startups.
Fun.
Right. And so now the first thing there is making money. So first of all, angels
first
have
things
to realize
first.
first things first. But by the way, most entrepreneurs don't realize this. Most entrepreneurs think, oh, you're an angel investor. That means you must be coming down from heaven as an angel to give me money. You've answered my prayers. Here's the money. No, it doesn't quite work like that, right? So we are first and foremost, every angel investor is economically driven, right? And so the goal is to make money in this investment. It's not a charitable contribution because you're not a charity. My goal is to make money. Now, that being said, there are a host of other things that come out and come from angel investing. So among other things, you get to see the latest and greatest of everything. You get to be kept at the forefront of innovation because you're investing in a new company that doesn't exist. It's typically based on some new approach to business, some new technology, some new market, some new something. And if you're a curious, interested person, just being at the forefront and watching what's happening and learning it can be really fascinating. And if you do nothing other, even if you're just looking at companies before you make your first investment, you'll be seeing pitches from all of these companies that are doing these new, interesting things. So it's wonderful entertainment in that sense and knowledge and for people who are curious. Next, it turns out that the average angel investor today in the United States, although this is beginning to change, is actually a former entrepreneur who was cashed out. So the typical member of an angel group that belongs to the Angel Capital Association here in the United States has been an entrepreneur for 50 years, has started 2 or 3 of their own companies. And so they know what being an entrepreneur is like. And so in that sense, this gives you much of the benefits of being an entrepreneur without actually having to have all the craziness of being an entrepreneur. I liken it to being like a grandparent. You get all the fun of children without having to change the diapers.
You can send them home.
So you can sit home and okay, take your kids back, right? So the entrepreneur doesn't get any sleep, but you can actually sleep, but you get a lot of the vicarious fun of doing that. You get the chance to nurture and give back. I mean, for me, mentorship, which we discussed before, is such an important part of this. I mean, I spend much of my time teaching and mentoring and helping, and for somebody who has been successful in their career, and in theory, if you're an angel investor with disposable capital, that you got somehow, some way, and typically of an age where you've had some experience, the ability to pass that, pay it forward, to pass it on to the next generation is one of the most heartwarming and exciting things. And I give a couple of examples in the book where young people who I bet on early on did phenomenally well. One of them was David Steinberger, who started a company called Comixology, which was acquired by Amazon. He had never had experience starting a company, and watching this company actually grow and turn into a serious player was really heartwarming, and being his advisor and chairman of the board was great. Another company, a woman named Alexa von Tobel, started a company. She had been a product manager at another one of my portfolio companies. She started a company doing financial information for women called LearnVest. Just last month, the company was acquired for over $250 million. And it's just to watch somebody with a vision and an idea and a goal implement that and be really successful is extraordinarily heartwarming. And then finally, the last piece is you get to change the world. Because any company that's going to be a success, starting from nothing, is doing something that has an impact clearly on the world. People are using it, they're buying and selling, they're using its products and services. But there are also companies that can change the world positively, not just from the operation of the capital and environment by people buying and selling things, but by having a business purpose that has an impact on society. We call this impact investing. The flip side is social venturing, if you're applying entrepreneurial skills to things that are good for society. And so there are a number of angel investors who specialize in investing in new kinds of companies that are profit-making companies, but that will also change the world on the side, whether they are providing mosquito nets to households in Africa. I mean, frankly, I think that our platform Gust is a social venture because it's enabling entrepreneurship around the world. Most people would look at this as a purely commercial venture, but to me, this is actually having a positive societal effect. The trick, of course, in being an impact investor is you have to decide, you have to make a decision up front. Are you impact first, or are you financial first? You'll often hear the term a double bottom line. I'm investing in a company that's going to do well and do good for society at the same time. The challenge is doing good doesn't fit in the same math equation as dollars and cents. There's no physical way to get these two things into one calculus, so you can't have a double bottom line. What you can do is to say either I'm going to optimize for the biggest possible return I can economically, but I'm going to set a floor. I will only invest in companies that do at least this good for society. Or alternatively, you can do the other way around and you say, okay, I'm going to invest in companies, profit-making companies that do good for society, but the most important thing to me is optimizing, maximizing the societal impact. So I'm going to look for those startups that have the most impact on society, but I will set a floor for the kind of economic return that I'm looking for here. And I discuss that in the book, and I provide some charts and graphs to help you figure out where you're going and what kind of businesses there are in there. But impact investing can be really extraordinarily rewarding as well. So when you add all these things together to making money, which is the first part of the book, right? So if you can get a 30% IRR and see what's, be at the forefront of what's going on and mentor somebody and see a young person flower and really blossom under your mentorship, and change the world and have the fun, exciting world of entrepreneurship, and what more do you want?
So let's go back a little bit into the nitty-gritty. Talk to us a little bit about doing your due diligence and looking under the hood. What do you need to do? What do you need to focus on?
When you get pitched by an entrepreneur, what do they tell you? They tell you the good things. They don't say, oh, here are all the problems we're facing. Right? No, they spin a wonderful story about how they're going to change the world, make a fortune. They have this amazing product that nobody else has done, that everybody wants. I mean, that's the essence of a pitch. It's called spin. And so they have, whether it's an elevator pitch or a quick 5-minute pitch or a typical 15, 20-minute venture pitch, it's all about making the company look good and exciting. And so one of the first challenges that face every new angel investor is falling in love with the first company they see. And the second, and the third, and you want to invest in every company that you see because there are all these amazing pitches. But there actually have been studies that show there is an absolute direct correlation between the amount of time spent on due diligence on a company and the ultimate returns. Because things are rarely exactly the way they are presented in the pitch. And even if they are, you need to know what you're getting into, what the market is like. And so due diligence means if they say they have these very happy customers, call one of them or two or three of these customers. Okay. If they say they have no competitors, boy, if they have no competitors, you got a problem, because either there are really no competitors at all, which means not one other person out of the 7 billion people in the world thinks this is worth pursuing, in which case, 7 billion to 1, you got to think about it. Is this really, if there's no customer, no competition at all? Or alternatively, there is competition and they're not telling you about it, which means that either they don't know about it, which isn't very good, or they know about it and they're not telling you, which is even worse, because that's the integrity issue in there, right? So things, and then if it's a product in an area that you know about, you want to try the product. Does it work? So you want to take a look at their experience. You want to make sure their books are all correct. So there's both legal due diligence, technical due diligence, business due diligence. And so sometimes, depending on how much investment you're putting in, your attorney can help with the legal due diligence, making sure are they appropriately incorporated, do they have all of the signed forms of intellectual property assignment from their employees? Are they in compliance with all their laws and regulations and all that kind of stuff? Then technical due diligence is, does the product work? Are they, do they actually have what they say they have? I mean, people have been known to fake things, and it sounds insane, but I have, I've had people actually try and pull the wool over your eyes, or they have something, they take something else and put a new logo on it and say it's theirs. That's awful. It doesn't happen that often, but God forbid, if you put your money into it and you find out that happens, won't you feel like an idiot, right? So you want to do technical due diligence to make sure the product works. And then, for an angel investor, typically most important is the market and company due diligence, the business diligence, which is that, who are the competitors out there? Are the customers happy? How are they selling? Look at their historical sales over time. Is it going, it's a hockey stick, which is great, going up? Is it steady going up? Has it been flat for a while? Is it going down? That would be awful. Is it possible to invest in a company whose sales are going down? Maybe, but you better be damn sure there's some reason as to why it's going to turn around all of a sudden and miraculously go up, right? So if you do your due diligence, the more due diligence you do without tying the company up in knots for months and months and months, typically the higher return you're going to get.
What would you say is the most critical thing to know about the financial ecosystem?
It's really important for both entrepreneurs and investors to understand the place of each player in the overall ecosystem. So, for example, if you ask an entrepreneur, a new, fresh entrepreneur, where do you get money from? They'll say, well, banks or angels and VCs. Well, those are like three completely different operations that invest or provide money at three completely different times in the life cycle of a company. And so again and again, I'll often hear the question, well, what should I go to? Which is better for me to get money from, an angel or a VC? Well, you know what? Typically, you don't have a choice. It's not a binary choice. It's like saying, what should I drive? A school bus or a Formula One racer? Well, the question is, what are you doing? Are you taking 40 kids to kindergarten? Are you driving in 24 hours of Le Mans? Or are you, taking 80,000 pounds of machinery across an ice road, right? Well, so the answer is one or the other or neither, in that case, may be appropriate for what you're doing, but it's certainly not going to be both, right? You can't, there's no way that both a Formula One car and a school bus are going to be appropriate for any one thing that you're doing. So therefore, typically angels and VCs are at different parts of the spectrum. The very first cash into a company comes from you, from the entrepreneur. The entrepreneur has to put their own money in it. There's a wonderful New Yorker cartoon which shows two entrepreneurs pitching a VC, and they're saying, we put our heart and soul into this company. All we're asking from you is $10 million. So your heart and soul is great, and I'm sure it's worth more than $10 million. But as an investor, before I want to see you put your fungible money, the money that you can spend on a vacation or a fancy dinner, into this company. I don't want you to bankrupt yourself, but I want to see that you have some faith in your own self as an entrepreneur, that you're willing to bet money that you could spend having fun or doing something else somewhere on yourself, on this company. So that's where the first cash comes in. And then typically, at that point, you still have nothing to show for anything. It's still a pie-in-the-sky idea. So the next cash that comes in are typically from people who are investing not because the company is great, because they're not professional investors. They're not domain experts. What they are people who know you and love you and trust you and respect you. It's your friends and family. You don't have to have friends and family, but typically they're the only source you've got, because each of these sources of capital is typically available, the only capital available at a particular stage, right? And so friends and family are investing in your company because they know you. They want to help you, support you. It's like an old community barn raising. They're all going to pitch in, and so most people typically can figure out how to get raise some money for people who are not professional investors, whether it is $10,000 or $50,000 or $100,000, whether it's from their parents, their siblings, their Aunt Esther, their somebody they met at work or whatever it is. That's a friends and family, and that's typically where the first cash comes in. And it's only after you've got some kind of traction, where you have a product that's done or just about done, or people are using it, or you have beta sites, and increasingly these days you actually have customers for it or users, that's when you go to angel investors. And so those are these individuals we talk about, the rich-ish people who are putting in, personally, in the tens of thousands, maybe the low hundreds of thousands, but typically in that kind of range for cash. It's easier to convince one person, one angel investor who you met somewhere and knows something and knows about the industry, than it is to do an institution. And so for angel investors, and then the next way after that is organized angel investors, angel groups, where you'll have multiple angels getting together to pool their resources and write a bigger check. So instead of a $25,000 check, it might be $250,000, right? If you get 10 angels together at $25K a piece. But typically in the angel group stage, angels are investing in 1 out of 40 companies they see. So it's very competitive. So that means that you have to be better, more investable than the other 39 who are standing next to you. And that's why the bar continues to rise in terms of how far are you along the way. Because if you just have an idea, but the person next to you, she's got an entire company and customers and a product over there, she has de-risked it a lot more than your great idea. So I'm going to invest in that. And so typically that's where the next cash comes from. VCs and angel investors, VCs after angels, are a whole next group. VCs, traditional VCs, invest in 1 out of 400 companies they see. It's 10 times as hard to get money from a VC, but they invest in many, many fewer companies. I mean, you have, something like, 70, 80,000 companies a year, startup companies a year, that are invested in by angel investors in the U.S. alone. The number that are invested by VCs of any kind, seed funds, fewer than 1,000 companies. So it's much tougher to get a VC investment, and VC investments tend to be bigger because they do few of them every year, and they need a higher return. So you're looking at, that's why they're investing. They're trying for unicorns. And if you're a traditional VC fund, they have to invest in a company that could be $1 billion company. And so your quick startup idea for a social network is unlikely to be that unicorn. And so therefore, if you were at a stage where a VC is going to come in and write you a $5 million check, you're probably past angel investors at that point. On the other hand, if you're in a space where you can only get angel money, VCs aren't going to come in. So understanding where the sequence goes from angels to angel groups to venture funds. There are strategic investors who will invest at any point in a company's lifestyle. There are corporations who are providing funding for not just a financial return, but for other returns as well, whether it's building their pipeline of technology, whether it's for building a customer pipeline or adding value to their products. There's something else going on there, and they can therefore be much less sensitive to valuation than a financial investor can, but there's always a catch for what they're looking for, and if you know what the catch is and it makes sense, that's great. Otherwise, be careful, right? And it's only as a company gets more and more successful, gets farther down the line, and actually has revenues, perhaps even profits, that then you can go to banks. Because banks are not in the business of taking risks. Banks are in the business of renting money. So they don't care if you make a fortune or lose a fortune. Banks can say, okay, here's $100, I'm charging 10% interest. At 1 year from now, come back and give me $110. And if you take that $100 and you make it Uber, well, congratulations, you can buy me dinner. But you know what? If you take that $100 and you lose the whole thing, I'm very sorry. Maybe I'll buy you dinner because I'm sorry for you, but I need that $110 back at the other side. So therefore, since banks are not in the risk business, banks are not going to invest money or lend money to startups because, as we've discussed, the average startup fails. Instead, banks only want to provide money to people where they know they can absolutely get it back at the end of the year. And so therefore, typically, you've got to have revenues, and you probably should have profitability before you go to a bank. And then for a tiny few companies, the ability to go after the public markets and raise money from everybody on the stock market, because now you are big enough to you register with the SEC and you file your reports, so you're very transparent, people know what you have. You can access public capital from anybody, not just accredited investors, but from every widow and orphan and person on the street. So understanding the role of the ecosystem, the finance ecosystem, where money comes from, at what stage, what kind of risk-return ratio is it looking at, is critically important to know where you should be looking for money at any given time.
David, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
That was David S. Rose. Thank you so much for joining us at Sartor TV today. I'm Jennifer Crumpton. We'll see you next time.